Alright, for this knife we're going to make a simple pouch sheath. It's not going to have any tooling on it. And the way I do it, there's a lot of ways to do it, but the way I do it is fold a piece of paper in half, just draw a line down the center. I'm using 8.5 by 14. Just makes it a little bit easier and keeps me from having to tape pieces of paper together sometimes, not always. Take the knife and lay it out with the blade away from the straight edge here. The sheath's going to be folded over this way, so the stitched edge will be over here. Keep in mind that the paper is a lot thinner than the leather, so you've got to give yourself a little extra room. I don't know if there's a way to calculate that, but after a while you just kind of get a feel for it. So what I do, because the knife's going to be a lot thicker up here because of the handle material than it is down here. As you can see, I'm tilting it away. And then I just trace the outline of the blade. Now for a pouch sheath, I want it to come up, or the knife to sit in it at least halfway up the handle to 3/4 of the way. So right about here is how high I want the sheath to come. Alright, right about in that area. Well, can't have a sheath shaped like that, because then the top, this spot, is wider than the top spot once you fold it over. You can have design to it, and because of this piece here, we can add a little decorative design to it. And where we have it come out and then come up like this, kind of a gun holster type look. But now that would be stitching it right on there, on this line, and we don't want to do that. I need to have a welt, and I'll explain the welt when we get to it. I need to have a welt, so I'm going to give myself a little more room. And you can use a ruler and measure. Measure about 1/2 inch out from the line that I drew, because my welt is going to be about 1/4, maybe a little bit more than 1/4 inch. You can use a compass, a little pencil and pointer thing, and trace it if you've got one, or you can just kind of wing it like I do. Whatever works best for you. Just get it to a shape that you like, and one that you want, and then you're good. Now here at the top, I don't like it to come straight across like this, so I'm going to have it come up just a little bit. Like that. Might even bring it down just a little bit more like that. Okay. Now I need to put the belt loop on there. And the belt loop, I'm going to start actually from this edge and this edge, and then it's going to come in quite a bit here and quite rapidly, because it's going to come down to about here, this area. So I don't want to go up too much, because then I'll be, when I fold it over, out into this area where I'm going to be stitching, and I don't want to do that. So I bring it in, and this edge I bring in. Doesn't have to come in quite as quickly as that edge does. And I want my belt loop to be at least 2.5 inches, which is here. So I need to come up this way. But now I need to continue up, and here's where I guess I do need another piece of paper. I'm going to go grab some tape. I'll be right back. Okay, I've got another piece of paper taped onto there, so I can finish drawing the belt loop. And I just bring it up. I like to round them a little bit, like that. And that'll be my belt loop. The stitching area will be down here. That'll give me plenty. Probably don't need to come up quite that high. In fact, if that's 2.5 inches from here, I'll just come up here a little bit. Alright, now that I've done that, I need to cut it out. But to do that, I'm just going to fold that piece of paper, or those 2 pieces of paper, in half. Get out my trusty scissors and start cutting. Now that the pattern's cut out, we need to determine whether or not we're going to have a left hand or right hand draw sheath. I want a right hand draw sheath. If you take this piece of paper and fold it over, now we've created a left hand draw sheath. So what we do is we fold it the other way and fold this the other way, and now we've created a right hand draw sheath. So we'll transfer that pattern to the leather and then cut that out. Now I've marked this top. If this was the outside of the leather, we fold it in, it'll come out a right hand draw sheath. If I were to flip it around and draw the other side on top, it would be a left hand draw sheath. So I just use an ink pen and trace the outline of the sheath. With the pattern transferred to the leather, then I just take a razor knife and cut out the leather. The next thing I want to do is cut out the welt. Now I said I'd explain that. The welt, because when you fold this over and you stitch this edge, if you put in a sharp knife into the pouch, you run the risk of cutting the stitching and ruining your sheath. So what you do is you put a piece of leather in between these folded pieces and then stitch through that so that the sharp edge of the knife, when you insert it in the pouch, can't come in contact with the stitching itself. So now we cut out the welt, and I just use the piece of leather that we just cut as a pattern. And I just eyeball it. And we'll cut that out and be right back. Alright, the sheath is cut out and the welt is cut out. The next thing I want to do is, again, this is fairly thick leather. I want to make it a little easier to fold over. So I've marked a line down kind of the center there. And I'm going to use this. This is an adjustable gouge. You can set the depth of it. And I'm going to make this a little thinner around where I fold it. With that thinned out, it folds over much easier. The next thing I want to do is dye the leather before I fold it and sew it. You don't have to do this step now, but if you've got any nooks and crannies, it's sometimes easier to dye it first. Sometimes when I'm explaining it or how to make a sheath, I won't dye it first because it's easier to see sometimes, but this is a pretty simple sheath design, not a whole lot of moving parts to it, so we'll dye it now. I'm going to use a Cordovan. It's a dark brown. I just like the Fibings leather dye, so that's what I'm going to use today. Just an applicator, and here it is. I like to just dampen the leather just a little bit. I find that the dye goes on a little bit better when I do that. I just pour the dye into the cap there so it's easier to access than from the big bottle.